Okay, so the main point of tonight's training is regarding topic on carbohydrates and how we can actually use them, how we can leverage them, and why they deserve a place in everyone's life and everyone's diet. So everything today seems to be super anti-carb, super low carbohydrate. You've got, keto diet, paleo diet, which are both, keto's basically no carbohydrates, paleo's lower carbohydrates. And all these low carb methods and strategies for dieting and eating are, posed as the best methods for fat loss and best ways for fat loss. And all this stigma, you kind of get the feeling that, carbs are bad, carbs are the devil, carbs are what makes you fat. And then, a lot of these products from food companies, their main marketing headline is, low carb or, zero carb, zero sugar, all these different things. And it just creates an entire connotation around carbohydrates that they are bad, they make you fat, carbs are the devil, stay away from. None of it's true. It's not true. Carbohydrates are not bad. Carbohydrates will not make you fat. Excess calories will make you fat. It does not matter what macronutrient they are. If you are eating in a caloric excess, it does not matter if it is with protein, fats, or carbohydrates, that will lead to weight gain and fat gain. It is not just carbohydrates. So let's get into, now that we've kind of like debunked everything, carbs are bad, and kind of move past that, let's kind of get into the topic of carbohydrates and how we can actually implement them in their life. Because who doesn't want to eat carbs, right? Who doesn't want carbs in their life? Everyone, potatoes, rice, bread, fruit, all the good stuff, everything that everybody loves. We want that in our diet, right? So how can we use it correctly? How can we leverage them to help carbs bring us more success in our everyday life? So to start out with, carbs are actually the only non-essential macronutrient. Now, I know I just explained that, you shouldn't cut carbs into your life and that you should have carbs, but when it comes down to it, you do not need carbohydrates to survive. All you need is protein and fat. If you never ate a single carbohydrate for the rest of your life, but you had protein and fat and adequate calories and adequate hydration, you would survive and you'd be fine. But just because we don't technically need them to survive, we should still have carbohydrates. Why? So there are two main reasons why we want carbohydrates in our life. The first reason is carbohydrates are our primary source of energy. They're our primary source of fuel, especially depending on what kind of, training, what kind of exercise you go through in your daily life. If you are exercising and your heart rate gets above 70% of your maximum heart rate, so if you are doing any kind of, relatively high intensity exercise, whether it's, you're doing something more than a light jog, you're, swimming, you're lifting weights, you're doing, CrossFit, high intensity interval training, Orange Theory, Peloton, all these different stuffs, pretty much every body weight workout out there is designed to push your heart rate above that 70% threshold, and bam, you are now using carbohydrates as your main fuel source. So if you have no carbohydrates and you like to do that kind of training, you're leaving your body out to dry. You're giving your body no fuel to perform the task you want it to perform. Now, if you're kind of the person that just, gets 10 to 15,000 steps a day and their heart rate never really gets above 70% of their max, then you can get by with pretty low carbohydrates and you'd probably be fine. But for the majority of us who like to, get our heart rate going, break a sweat, and, feel something in our training, we need carbohydrates. All right, we need to fuel that energy system to allow us to perform and improve in our exercises and trainings. The second main reason, in today's world, especially in Western culture, everything is super high stress. Everything is, we need to get this done fast, we need to get this done well. I need you to do twice the work in, half the time, and it's go, 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 go. There's very little rest and digest. Everything is fight or flight, pedal to the metal, get the job done. That's with our training, as we see with, the revolution of, intensive bodybuilding, these mega races, like, these Ironman triathletes and mega marathons and all these crazy competitions that, the big rise in CrossFit now, stuff like Orange Theory, the increase in HIIT training, the increase in sprint style training. All these things, especially in today's society, is emphasizing go, go, go. Everything's to the max. Everything is high stress and high speed. Now, what's that going to do? We know that when our stress raises, guess what causes that? Guess what allows us to compensate with that stress? Cortisol. Cortisol is our main stress hormone. And when we are in those environments, when we can't rest and digest, when we are pushing 60 to 80 hours of work a week trying to get a project done, when we have a big presentation or a big proposal to give, and we're super stressed out about it, we're super focused and dialed in, that's cortisol rising to give us that ability to do that. At the gym, when you're trying to push for a PR, that's cortisol. When you're going through exercise, depending on what it is, for the most part, it's going to be cortisol. Our cortisol is through the roof when how we wake up in the morning. That is cortisol. When we wake up in the morning, our cortisol is at an all-time high peak throughout the day. That is all cortisol. Our stress is all through the roof. Now, cortisol is extremely powerful and is a great hormone that we can leverage in certain situations and have a lot of success. But when our cortisol is way too high, guess what doesn't happen? We never hit the rest and digest. We never recover. And that's why you see everyone getting so sick all the time, everyone feeling so burnt out all the time, everyone's so tired all the time. That's why, some people need to drink, 2 pots of coffee to get through the day, is because they're not recovering. They're not sleeping well. They're not resting. Their body is not able to kind of like tone things down and recover. And that's when having elevated cortisol levels all the time really hinders us. It doesn't help us. It hinders us and it damages us. And it also destroys our immune system. Stress is probably one of the biggest immune system hinderers out there. So if our stress is high all the time, guess what? You're going to get sick all the time because your immune system is taking a hit. Your gut health is taking a hit. Your recovery is taking a hit. Everything is taking a hit. Now, how do we shut off our cortisol? How do we lower our stress levels? Insulin. Insulin and cortisol are inverted. When our insulin goes up, our cortisol goes down. Now, how do we spike insulin? How do we get our insulin up? Through carbohydrates, through high glycemic foods. When we eat a big meal, especially if it's high on carbohydrates, our insulin rises. So we can actually absorb those nutrients and we can utilize all the food that we just put into our body. So through eating carbohydrates and leveraging carbohydrates correctly, our insulin rises, our cortisol decreases, and therefore we shift from a super high stressed out state into a recovering and resting state. Now, those are the 2 main reasons why we need carbohydrates in our life: energy source, and also to lower stress and to increase recovery. So let's talk about, now we know why we need carbohydrates in our life. Let's talk about how to leverage them. So let's think of some of the most stressful situations that you can put yourself through. A stressful week at work, when it's super high, workload hours, when you have a big presentation to make, finals week for students, when you're big presentation for students, for coworkers, when you're a big proposal, when you're, trying to close a deal. All these things are super high stress. What is also super high stress? Well, you might think it's relaxing, but your body's really not really high stressed out state. And that is when you're working out, when you're training. Believe it or not, I get it. Gym is therapy, workout is therapy. It's my therapy too. But if you're trying to pick up 400 pounds off the ground, your body is not very relaxed. If you're trying to hit a new PR on a 5K, your body is not very relaxed. You're really tensed up and you're going. If you're, trying to do your first Ironman, you're not very relaxed. When you're midway through a marathon, you're not very relaxed. When you're doing like a Peloton class or an Orange Theory class or any kind of HIIT style training, you are not relaxed. You may think it relaxes you, but you are not relaxed in that state. You are super stressed out because you're putting your body through a stressor. Your body has to endure moving weight it's not used to moving. Your body has to endure, running a long distance. Your body has to endure, running to a new speed. Your body has to endure pushing its heart rate for an elevated, period of time that it's not used to. If we go back to our primitive stages, all of these situations resemble stressful situations. And go back to a caveman. when would it, like in those times, in those stages, when would you be running for a long period of time? When would you be sprinting? Probably to get away from something that's hunting you, or you're hunting something. You are in the need of food. You are hungry. You know you need food to survive. So you are running. You are running either to survive, or you're running to survive, and you're either running to not get killed and eaten, or to kill and eat. So those instincts have not gone away in today's age. Yes, we have readily accessible food. We have, water. We have shelter. But if we are pushing our body to these levels, it is still triggering the same response as it did back then. And that's we're getting stressed. We are in a fight or flight state. Our cortisol is up and we are stressed out. Okay. So how do we leverage carbohydrates? Well, after, let's take working out, for example. This is probably the best example I can think of. We know working out, stressed out state, you are in a catabolic state. You are breaking down. That's the whole point behind lifting, right? You want to go lift, you want to break the muscle tissue down so that you can go eat and recover and your muscle comes back stronger, right? So when you are in that breaking down state, you are in a catabolic state. You are so again, breaking down, you are in a stressed out state. Now, when you're done at the gym and you're in a car and you're going home, you probably still can feel yourself like shaking. That's because your body does not know you just left the gym. Your body does not know your run just ended. Your body does not know your training session just ended. Your body does not know you are no longer in a stressed out state. So it is still in that catabolic state. It is still breaking down. And if you don't fuel yourself with carbohydrates and leverage them correctly in that situation, your body's never going to know it's not in that catabolic state. Your body's never going to know that you stopped training. So in those time periods, when we are done working out and done training, when we leave the gym, you want to hit those carbohydrates. You want to hit, high glycemic carbohydrates, oats, carb supplement, fruit, cereals, fruit snacks, stuff like that. That's why, you see a lot of these, high performance athletes, crushing Skittles on the sideline of the game, or fruit snacks out of swim meet, or like super high glycemic or like fruits, like oranges, pineapples, super sweet, sugary fruits. Why do they do that? Why is everybody like, oh, like why is that person eating Sour Patch Kids, or like, spooning honey at the at this competition? Because they need those super sugary, high glycemic foods that'll spike their insulin and shut off their cortisol. They need to start recovering as fast as possible. And when you put in high glycemic index foods, your insulin rises, your cortisol shuts off. You're now from a catabolic, a breaking down state, into an anabolic, a recovery state. You have gone from fight or flight to rest and digest. You are now in the clear, recovering and healing. So that's one way we can leverage carbohydrates, is post-workout. We need to shut our cortisol off from our training session by raising our insulin through carbohydrates. And now we are in a recovery mode. And that's one way we can leverage it. The second way is before we work out or throughout the day. So our glycogen stores, when we eat food, when we eat carbohydrates, our body stores them as glycogen. So when that happens, we typically use those stores from 24 to 36 hours. So the food we eat over the past 24 to 36 hours is our energy for that next period of time, right? It's not right before you hit the gym. You might get, if you eat something that's super high in sugar and a very, very high glycemic index carbohydrate before you hit the gym, you might get a little bit of energy boost from it. But for the most part, it is what you have eaten from the past 24 to 36 hours. So if you've got a couple of really hard days of training coming up, you want to make sure you are eating enough carbohydrate and enough calories those past couple, or for the previous day and the previous day and a half. That way you have enough energy and you have enough food and fuel to push you through the next day. Okay? So those are two ways. That's how we want to leverage carbohydrates in our life, based off of what training modality we're using. That'll determine how many carbohydrates we need. If we are a high intensity trainer, and high intensity is anything above 70% of your max heart rate. Okay, so There we go. That's, if we're pushing above that, basically, if you're not just walking, you're going for a light jog or a very light bike, you are now in a higher intensity modality of training, and you need carbohydrates to fuel that training. Now, you also need carbohydrates to leverage against your stress, leverage against your cortisol, leverage against the stress response from training. If you've had a super hard week at work, if you've had a big presentation due at the end of the week in front of your CEO, your boss, all these really important people, that's going to be super stressful. How can we leverage carbohydrates to help with that situation? Just by eating enough carbohydrates throughout the day, eating enough calories throughout your day. If you are sacrificing food because you need to work more or for a presentation, that is going to hinder you. It is not going to help you. The half hour you're going to get, the hour you're going to get back in your day from not eating is not going to make up for the hindrance that the lack of eating is going to cause on your stress levels and recovery levels. So that's another way about how we can leverage carbohydrates in our lives. If we're having a super stress, if we have a high stress job, lawyers, doctors, teachers, frankly, every single, like, stockbroker, I don't know, every single position, students, every job has high stress moments. And frankly, in today's age, again, when people want twice as much done in half the time, everything is pretty high stress. There's not any low stressful work situations. Everything is pretty pedal to the metal, get it done. So we need to eat enough. We need to eat carbohydrates. We need to eat enough calories. That way we had the fuel, we had the methods to raise our insulin throughout the day to lower our cortisol. And that way, that we're not just constantly breaking down, we are able to recover, we're able to stay healthy, we're able to adapt and adequate ourselves to these high stress environments because we're eating enough, we're eating the right things, we're eating carbohydrates to lower that stress. Okay. So the third tip I'm going to give you on leveraging carbohydrates is with sleep. So we just talked about how carbohydrates lower cortisol, because carbohydrates raise your insulin. And so when your insulin goes up, remember, insulin up, cortisol down. When we eat carbohydrates, that can help lower our stress. So when we sleep out, what happens when you can't sleep? Odds are you're stressed out. You're either overstimulated or you're thinking about everything from the day, and you can't wind down and you're stressed out. How can we prevent that? You can eat carbs in your last meal of the day, or have like some kind of like fruit snack, fruit space or fruit comma snack, right? So it doesn't have to be fruit snacks. It can be an apple, it can be an orange, it can be a banana. Having something that is having carbohydrates either in your last meal or before you go to bed can really do wonders to help lower and kind of crush any remaining cortisol you want to go to bed. Because remember, when we wake up, our cortisol's here, and then as we go throughout the day, remember, we start to feel more tired. It's because as we go throughout the day, our cortisol levels drop, and then we want our cortisol to be as low as possible at the end of the day so that we can go to sleep. We can go to sleep, we can rest, we can digest, we can recover, and then when we wake up in the morning, guess what? It's going to be right back here, right back at the top. So when we leverage carbohydrates pre and post training, remember, pre is not 10 minutes before, pre is 24 hours to 36 hours before our training. When we leverage carbohydrates after our training to take ourselves out of the breaking down and the stressed out mode that we were in from training and into recovery mode, and we leverage carbohydrates just by eating enough throughout the week to deal with our stressful lives, those are huge components. And then we factor in eating carbohydrates at dinner, and maybe like a carbohydrate snack before we go to bed, so we can tank the rest of our cortisol from the day. We can lower it, and then we are finally in a great relaxed, a great recovery, a great rest and digest state to end the day and to actually get good quality sleep. So those are the main ways to leverage carbohydrate in your life, and that's why you need carbohydrates in your life. Even though it is not an essential macronutrient, you don't need carbs for survival, but you can leverage them to get so much more out of life, so much more out of training, so much more out of your work week, so much more out of your sleep, and create a healthier life and create a healthier life or healthier future for you. Now, All this being said, this does not mean just go throughout each day and like crush boxes of cereal and Pop Tarts and eat like a whole bag of apples and just go ham on every carbohydrate you can find. Because again, not only is not gonna put us in excess carbohydrates, that's gonna put us in excess calories, and that's where the weight gain happens, right? So with everything being said, that does not mean go eat every single carbohydrate you can find, but rather learn how many carbohydrates you should be eating and leverage those carbohydrates in the situations I just explained to give you energy, to help recover from the gym, help recover from your training, to help deal with the stress in your work week, and to help you sleep. And that does it for tonight's training.